Hey, what's going on? Chris, Thunder Laser. And there's a huge discussion about can the bolt cut? And yeah, it can cut really well. I think the only concern would be air delivery. Um, as we cut thicker materials, we need more air to put out the fire, and the way that the air is introduced into the cut on the bolt is from an angle as opposed to straight down. Um, and that's really the only limiting factor because, in theory, we are working with a much smaller beam. I equate it to cutting with a butter knife versus cutting with a scalpel. The bolt is definitely the scalpel, 4 times smaller beam. So that said, we purchased some wood from a online distributor that seems to be used quite a bit in the industry. So we wanted to check to see if it will cut the 1/4 inch wood without an issue. We bought several pieces, different material, and I have some crappy stuff from Lowe's and Home Depot here as well. So let me flip the camera around real quick. And I wanted to show you just a couple things. A thing to be concerned about, or a thing to look for on your materials, is the layer. You know, on this material, we have a nice soft layer with outside being also soft layer. So I don't know if it's pine with a laminate layer on top, but there's always going to be inconsistencies, and the first thing that we want to do when we have issues cutting is go right towards our material, not the machine. Just take a look at this. This is our material layers. Obviously, it's probably an end run right here where they overlapped. So that's extra material that you don't see and don't know about, extra glue and all of that. This is just standard inside the layers. On this piece of material, we have, our laminate layers, soft pine, it looks like, a hardwood center core with more soft pine, and then the laminate layer on the other side. So these are things to consider, especially if you go with like a cabinet grade. The cabinet grade is going to have denser woods in the middle along with much stronger glues. So if you go with that, it's going to be almost impossible to get through. Some MDFs are very high in the resin concentration, and it just will not cut. I have tried to cut with my 130 watt a 1/4 inch of the more difficult MDF, and it just won't do it. I have to use almost all the power. It looks like I burnt it on the barbecue. It's horrible. So let's take a look at what we purchased, and let's run it on the bolt to see what the outcome is. All right, so full transparency. This is the wood that we purchased. I did buy some 1/8 inch just to test it out, but this is MDF core. So Plywood's good quality, MDF core. So we got red oak, cherry, maple, and walnut, all at a 1/4 inch. Measured it out, it was like 0.23 on the calipers. So of course, most of these woods, they say that they're 1/4 inch, but they're really not. They're close, but they don't measure a full 1/4 inch. So let's run this on the bolt, and to show you what I'm using a graphic that has both straightaways for my my high speeds. So we have our straightaway, we have our 90-degree corner, we have 45-degree corners, and we have a radius. I like using these to test my materials because I'm running through all of the different speeds that our min and max power are going to use. Now in this case, I'm not fluctuating it. I'm keeping the min and max power the same. So, and kind of one of the things that I do on the trainings to let people know on something like this is the max power is where we can achieve the requested speed. The min power is where the machine has to slow down to make a turn, kind of like a car. So in this area here, where we're making a 90-degree, kind of a 45-ish, and then a radius, it may have to slow down because it can't go as fast. And that's when it's going to be using the minimum power. So most of the time we are matching the min and max power, so it cuts really well. When we start to see charring in the corners, that's when we're going to back it down. So if I was using 90%, like I am here, and I noticed that I was cutting out a name with lots of swoops and corners and tight areas, and it was charring in those areas, I may back this 90 down to 85, just to compensate for the machine slowing down. Now, the bolt adds one layer of complexity, and that's something that most people haven't encountered is the RF frequency. We can adjust the frequency, the radio frequency of the tube. And personally, I've done some testing on it, and I have found that the lower frequency does a much better job of cutting. And it may not be for every material, but for papers and cardstock, and obviously this wood that we're working with, I have found that it works much better. All right, so looking at my settings, high air, very important. 8 millimeters per second, and 90% power. If I go to my advance, I have the frequency override at 1 kilohertz. This tube on the bolt goes from 1 to 25. You may notice that 25 is really good for engraving. You may notice that 1 kilohertz is very good for cutting. It's something to play with. Build yourself a test, something like this. Let me go to Laser Tools, Material Test, and let me see where I have it. I believe this is my frequency test. Yes. So I have 1 row and an 11 count preview. So I'm just going through 1 through 25 on the kilohertz. So build yourself a test like this where you're staying constant in the power, constant in the speed, and the only fluctuation or the only threshold that's changing is your frequency. If you need a test like this, we could probably build a site or a document on it and add these, because we can definitely download and upload, import and export these tests that I build. Let's close that out. So again, going back to the power and speed, I am at 8 millimeters per second, 90% power, max and min, and advanced 1 kilohertz. So let's go ahead and send this over to the laser, and let's see what she does. All right, so I'm using the pass-through. These are a little bit longer. I don't feel like cutting them. I have the 2-inch lens in here. You could use the 2.5, you could use the 4, but this material is thin enough that the 2 is more than adequate. Origin, frame it out. All right, looks good. And I'm going to hit start. Now, just a word to the wise, the sound that you're going to hear when you're changing frequencies is going to be different. It is a pitch, it is a different noise. We're doing kilohertz, so it may be obnoxious to some people. It may be just cool because it's changing sounds because of the radio frequency we're using. All right, so I believe this is cherry, and with very little effort, I think I have one little itty bitty hanger on it, which is fine because it was in a corner, but not much of an issue. Like I said, air plays a huge role, the way it's delivered on these bolts. And I mean, this looks really clean for the most part. A little bit of charring just because we are going slow, using a lot of power, but minimal transfer. All right, let's try another piece of material. This is the walnut, and I'm going to let this one go as well. Now, I would like to mention that I do have this adjusted all the way down. So you can see that I have, we have this adjustment in here that we could use. I have it pushed all the way down so it's closer to the surface. And I have it angled as close as I can without clipping the beam to the area that we're cutting, just so that I can clean out and put out that fire But again, maple, 1/4 inch. The cuts on this bolt are so tight. The kerf, the area being cut is so tight because of the beam size, so it's hard to get some of these out. But yep, once again, nice cut. It does have char, but it's minimal. It's not transferring over to my finger. Very easy. All right, let's do the other 2 pieces. Yep. Okay, and this is red oak. That one's a little bit tighter. So even just a difference, I mean, same exact internal structure, a little bit different laminate, more fibrous on this red oak. So it may take a little bit more power or a little bit more speed. But we can still see that the majority of it cut pretty well, just a couple little hangers. And, you know, with plywood, I expect that quite often. Just because of the variations in material and the grain. All right, let's try one more piece. All right, for our final piece on this 1/4 inch, we're going to do some maple. All right, so all 1/4 inch material was cut well using the same exact settings. The only issue that we had was the red oak. You know, it's a heavy grain, as you can tell, on this piece here. So obviously the fibers of the tree are, you know, a little bit different. I'm not a wood expert, but I can see that the grain is pretty heavy on this. And that plays a role into, you know, like you have a knot on, you know, on a piece of tree that you're working with a piece of lumber, and the knot is the hardest part. The grain plays a role into how well these things cut. So excellent cut on all of these, with that one being the hardest to cut through, but they still all cut through quite well. One other thing to go back to is I mentioned cabinet grade, stuff that we want to look for. So something like this, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of wood. That means it's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of glue, if not more. So looking at different woods, be very careful of what you're buying and pay attention. Like, I would have a very hard time cutting through that knot right there with the laser. You know, this is rather thick. It did cut through quite well on my 130 watt, but you know, you start getting into stuff like this that has some denser layers on the inside, not some soft pine, you're going to have difficulty cutting. So again, if you are having failed cuts, then the first thing to look at is your material. In most cases, it's going to be, you know, lenses, your speed and power, check your mirrors for cleanliness, and then your material. Most of the time, you know, it takes a very long time for, especially on a bolt, you know, something like that, for the tube to die. So we're looking at optics, and then we're looking at material. Looking at material first if it's something new that you purchased and it just doesn't seem to be cutting the way that you're used to. So hopefully this helps all of you that are trying to cut with the bolt, or asking questions of will it cut? And it will. It does quite a good job. I've gone thicker than that material, thicker than a 1/4 inch with acrylics. And will it do it? Yes. Is it going to be profitable for you? Probably not. We're moving quite slow to get through some of these thicker materials. 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch on the bolt, beautiful, works excellent. Just pay attention to the material you're purchasing. Hope that helps everybody. Have a good one.